Hi everybody, welcome to part 3 of our Creating a Literature Review. I'm going to talk in this video about choosing the right articles and then pulling information out of those articles and organizing that. So I want you to think about these 3 things as you're looking for your articles. You want articles that are relevant, which means they are a good match to your topic. They're going to help fill in some of the gaps. If you have a key idea that is part of your topic, an article should help fill in that gap or meet that need. You want articles that are going to be credible, and as long as you're choosing something from those reading journals that I recommended in video 1, you'll definitely have credible articles. But if you go out of those, you want to be sure that you're choosing an article that is associated with a professional organization, so that will help ensure its credibility. And then you want articles that have somewhat of a similarity to what it is you're studying. So you don't want something too far out that's not going to help. Remember that the links of the chain. So you're creating that chain, and your articles help to create those links. And so you want something that can easily be linked to what you already have. Here's a process that I use when I'm selecting an article. I start by reading the abstract. The abstract is that little synopsis at the beginning, and that helps me know if this article is going to keep me on the right track. If not, I just put it aside. I don't even go any further with it. But if the abstract is a good match, then I'll read the article straight through. No highlighting or making notes. I'm tempted to do that, but I try really hard not to because I want to get the general gist of the article. And again, trying to make sure that it meets my needs for my study. If it passes that test, then I go to step 3, where I'm going to read the article again, and now I'm going to make some tracks, and I'll talk in a little bit what I mean about making tracks. Now, I might not read the article straight through and then read it again right when I get done. There may be some time that passes in there, but I am reading that article all the way through at least twice. And that helps me to understand it better. When I get to the end of the article, I'll check that reference list and see if it looks like there's something on that list that might be a good next article. And that's where you can get the title and go to the William Allen White Library homepage and type in that title in the search box and then locate that next article. Now, you may come across some articles that are what we would call quantitative research. So those would be articles that have inferential statistics in them. And man, that can be tricky. It's tricky for me. And I took some higher level research classes for my PhD, but it's not my best subject. And so I just want to say that up front. If it's tricky for you, please know you are definitely not alone. But I don't want that to stop you from selecting articles that have quantitative research, because sometimes they can be the best ones to help you make your case or to help build those links on your chain. So here's just an excerpt from a quantitative research study, and I'll just read it real quick. According to the first ANOVA test, end-of-the-year reading scores significantly differed for students across the 3 reading conditions. I'm going to skip over the statistics part. Mean scores were 87 that should be 23, sorry, for the Literature Circle group, 81.54 for the Literacy Center group, and 74.39 for the Traditional Instruction group. Now, you may get to the end of that and think, okay, well, I don't know what that means. And you know what? That's okay. Focus on what you do know. Okay, so we know that in this research study, the students were broken up into 3 groups. And the group that had the Literature Circle as their treatment, their score was 87.23. The Literacy Center group, their score was 81.54. And the Traditional Instruction group, their score was 74.39. So we know the Literature Circle group scored the highest, and we know the Traditional Instruction group scored the lowest. That's the basic information. So you're basically reading around the statistics, and it sure would be better if you understood them, but if you don't, that doesn't mean that you can't take something away from the article. And especially if you read the beginning part, the literature review, read the description of how the data were gathered, and then read the discussion at the end. And that way you can focus on what really came of that data. So please don't let the statistics scare you off from using an article. Consider this question: does the study contain information that's going to help you? Help you as an educator, help you in your action research project? And if you can answer yes, then use that article and read around those statistics if you need to. So here's an example of an article that I used, and I said previously that I would explain this idea of making tracks. So when I'm on that second read of an article, when I'm starting to do some note taking and annotating, I have several things that I typically do with every article. And one is I put the date at the top when I have finished reading the article, and that's a good reminder to me that I did actually finish reading the article. And then I number the articles. Here's number 27. This is an article I used for the e-textbook study that I explained previously. You are not expected to have 27 articles. You're expected to have a minimum of 5 articles. So, but numbering helps me keep things organized. So for instance, if I find a really good quote in this article, I may make a list of quotes that I want to use in my project. And instead of, for each quote, writing out all the bibliographic information, I'll just put the number. So it's kind of like a little shorthand that gets me going faster when I'm in the midst of gathering information and not wanting to have to stop and create that reference list right at that time. You also see, kind of cut off a little bit on the left, page 524, and then some of my chicken scratchings. If there's something really good in the article that I think is a really good match to my research study, but I'm afraid I won't find it later, I'll put a little note over to the side to remind me, and I'll put it on the front page. Or I might put it on a sticky note. I didn't use any sticky notes when I made tracks with this article, but sometimes I'll use color-coded sticky notes to help me remember information that I want to come back to later. So if I have a topic, let's say in my e-textbook study, I had a topic about print textbooks. And so I might use my orange sticky notes, and everywhere I find that in my articles, I may mark it with my orange sticky notes. And that reminds me later on when I go to write that section about print textbooks, now I know where to go back in my articles to find that information. So I could have 3, 4, 5 different color sticky notes coming out of my article if that helps me to find the information later. I also will use arrows, lines, stars. Oftentimes, if it's something that's really, really good, I'll put like 4 stars right next to that paragraph, or a big giant arrow. So I know that is important. I want to be sure to come back to that. I'll use a lot of circles. I'll use a lot of lines and arrows. On the left, you see text complexity, and that was a topic that I was toying with having in my e-textbook literature review. It didn't end up in there as a topic, but I labeled that. So if I wanted to come back and find all the things about about text complexity later, I could easily do that. So really, it's not about you copying my system. It's about you creating your own system for picking out what is important, marking it on your article, and being able to come back to that later. Now, I showed my example using print, but you can do the same thing. Let's see if my computer's going to cooperate. Okay, so here's my article where I did a similar thing. Now, you remember I highlighted the headings previously, but let's say as I get into reading this article that I want to make some notes. So I'm going to click on I'm using Adobe Acrobat Reader here. I have my article in Adobe. I'm going to click on the note feature and go to where I want the note to be. Now I can add a note. Remember this important idea. And so now I have that there, and I can come back to that later. That's my way of making notes. And then of course I can also highlight, as you saw here. So I click on the highlighting tool, and then I'll highlight what I think is important. And so I can come back to that later. You can put a highlight and a note together. So the things that I showed you that I did on print, you can definitely do digitally too. And especially if you're really comfortable with reading digital print, that would be an important thing to do. Okay, so I have my articles. I'm gathering my information, but one thing that I like to do to help keep myself organized is to set up a folder for a project. My folder might be on my desktop. It might be it could be a paper folder if you'd rather print off your articles. You could use Google Docs or other curation sites like Zotero or LiveBinders or Diigo, or there's lots and lots of other ones. But I encourage you to start right from the beginning with some kind of an organizational system, a place that you're going to keep all of your articles, a system for recording your notes on your articles so that it makes sense to you and you can come back and find the information easier. So I shared with you a little bit about what I do, not because it's the best or it's because what you should do. It just has worked for me, but lots of other people do different things. So make that system your own and use that to help you keep organized in your search.